This is out of the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Let's see. This happened on January 4th, 2025. So a couple months ago. Las Vegas Review-Journal, the Blue State Blues is the name of the article. Progressives are frantically sounding the alarm about blue state governance. The motivation isn't improving quality of life, but the downstream political implications. Quote, bad news, Democrats. America is about to get even redder, warned a recent New York Times opinion video. The Atlantic put it this way. The Democrats are committing party side. A Newsweek headline shouted Democrats have a problem much bigger than Donald Trump. I got to tell you, just by the way, just as a side note, like that's just a couple of sentences where the Las Vegas News Journal is quoting the New York Times that was by the and then finished off with a Newsweek headline. I mean, everybody's talking about this. This isn't just like a one-off, thing. I mean, everybody's talking about this. The concern is the 2030 census. Every decade, congressional seats are reappropriated based on state populations. Because the House is fixed at 435 seats, one state's gain is another state's loss.
So, Mike, I always thought if people left one state, like, for example, people are leaving California, they're going to Colorado or some other state, they're taking their politics with them. So how is this looking bad for the Democrats, that Democrats are leaving Democratic states?
Oh, it's a good question. So what we found, and we're going to talk about that, but what we're finding is there are two states, what's being reported anyway, there are two states that are going to suffer from the census in 2030.
Okay.
The two states that are going to suffer are California and New York. In other words, they're going to lose
some seats.
Congressional seats.
Okay.
And they're going to lose, with that, they're going to lose electoral votes for the president.
I see.
Because the electoral votes the amount of electoral votes for president is the exact amount of people in the House of Representatives plus the exact amount of people in the Senate. That's where they come up with how many electoral votes are out there.
And those are that number is based on how many people live in that state.
Correct. So if your state has 2 people in the House of Representatives and 2 U.S. senators, you get 4 electoral votes. So what's happening is a lot of people are leaving California and they're leaving New York and they're going to states that are very red. And the folks that are leaving are probably Republican. They're probably people that are like, forget it. This is not worth it. I don't like these goofy, politics. I don't like these policies. So they're leaving. Now, that doesn't mean, everybody. There's a lot of, Democrats that are leaving Democrat states and going to Republican states. But for the most part, and I'm sure if you think about some of the people that left California, and moved to wherever state, were they Republicans or were they Democrats?
Yeah, I would say more Republicans for sure out of folks that I know that have moved to like Tennessee, for example. That's a very popular place to be moving. But I think because I lived in Colorado for a little while, I saw a lot of, very, I would say, liberal Californian folks moving to Colorado, for maybe not political reasons, but just moving to other states that are turning blue now or becoming more and more blue because of the kind of mass exodus, as they call it, of Californians into those states.
And the other thing is that a lot of the states that are benefiting from this, and we'll talk about that, I say benefiting, they're increasing in size from this, are very Republican states. So they can afford to take on a bunch of Democrats and still be Republican states. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this isn't like those states that are always on the bubble of like 50-50. You don't know which way it's going to go. It's not the swing states that are getting all of these Democrats moving in. It's Republican states.
You know what? Let's go right into it. Let's see. Okay, so the states that are going to benefit from this. So the 2 states that are going to lose votes are California and New York. In other words, there are going to be fewer electoral votes and fewer people in Congress. The states that are going to pick up are Texas, Florida, Idaho, and Utah.
Wow.
Now, Utah and Idaho are very red.
Yeah.
And Texas and Florida, interestingly enough, were going the direction of becoming battleground states over the last 25 years. But they are now pretty solidly Republican. And I actually came up with some statistics here. In 2016 in Texas, there were 43% of the population voted for Trump. 43% of the population voted against Trump, 52 voted for Trump. So it's just barely over 50%. And Democrats were really starting to see an opportunity in Texas. And Texas was getting a huge influx of of people, especially in the urban areas.
Yeah.
And the rural areas were remaining fairly conservative or Republican. And then in 2020, Trump again got 52% of the vote. In 2024, however, it's gone up to 56%.
Interesting.
It's gone up to 56%. Plus, they have 2 Republican senators, one of them being Ted Cruz, which is very Republican. No, there's nothing squishy about Ted Cruz. And then they have a Republican governor, which pretty much means that Democrats have given up. They're like, all right, we tried spending a bunch of money here, but this is not working. The other state that was right on the cusp was Florida. And if you go back to 2012, it was Obama won 50% to 49%. So they really thought they had a shot there, and they really started spending money. But then the next 3 elections went to Trump. 49%. He won, and then in 2020, he won 52%, and then in 2024, he won 56%. And the Democrats are no longer saying, hey, you know what? We think we have a shot in Texas and Florida. It's just not happening. But let's see. Texas currently has 40 people in the House of Representatives and Senators. So 38 are House of Representatives, 2 are senators. Florida has 30, Idaho has 4, Utah has 6, California has 54, and New York has 28. So they're expecting that California and New York combined, so they have 54 plus 28, that's 70, 80, 82. They're expecting that 82 to go down into the 70s.
Wow.
So they'll have much less influence, where Utah, Idaho, Florida, and Texas will have much more.
That's really interesting. I wonder if there's other census things going on besides just the folks moving out of one state into another state. I think we've been hearing a lot about less people having children, or people having children at later ages and things like that too. I wonder if that's showing up on that 2030 census as well.
I think there's a lot to it. A lot of it, though, is economics. There was a lot of information where it really just boiled down to economics. People just simply can't afford $1 million house.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's San Diego. I don't know if you can buy anything for under 100,000 or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's really expensive. And yeah, we get paid more out here, but not proportional. You know what I mean?
No, yeah. You have to not only have dual income, probably dual income, no kids, but dual income, no kids with very well-paying jobs. It's like all the stars have to align for buying a house in California.
Truly. And I used to give people a hard time for leaving California. And really the thing I was giving them a hard time for, what really set me off is when they'd leave California and then they'd turn around and throw stones. They'd go to Arizona, whatever, Tennessee, and then they'd tell us what idiots we are for staying, or, hey, look, I got this brand new gun and you guys are dumb because you can't get, come on. We're staying here. We're fighting. We're fighting the good fight. I thought that was, really classless and kind of cowardice, frankly. But the reality is, from the surveys I'm seeing, nobody's leaving because of gun laws. Nobody's leaving because of social laws. They're all leaving because of economics broadly. Maybe they got a better job. They'll be able to afford a bigger house, that kind of thing. Taxes. Yeah,
I'll be interested to see if the magazine ban situation has any effect. I think there's some, I'm thinking about specifically competitive shooters who are sponsored shooters that shoot USPSA and things like that. Their firearm of choice and what they compete with holds more than 10 rounds, and they're not going to be competitive in their sport if they are doing 2 reloads to everyone else's 0 reloads, right? So I'm interested to see if there is a shift in gun folks who are moving based on that, but I don't know, time will tell.
The other thing I thought that was really, really interesting is that Democrats are focusing in on identity politics. It's kind of interesting. Some statistics. It's not working. And I don't mean strategically.
Surprise. People don't care. They just want to be able to pay their bills. It's crazy.
And it's, the other thing though is they're focusing, I got to tell you, it's one thing, it was fairly interesting. I wanted to read a couple of things. In December 2023, men made up 96% of California's prisoners. By age 25, 15.9% of black males were felons. 6.3% of Hispanic males were felons. 1.7% of white males were felons. which is enormous. That's from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Had served jail time, not were felons, but had served jail time. Roughly 1/3 or 33% of black men have a felony record. 1/3 of adult black men have a felony record. That's significantly higher than the national average. The national average is about 8% of the population are felons.
Is that specifically for California? Or are you talking about like general U.S. statistics? Okay.
Nationally, yeah.
Interesting.
People with felony convictions more broadly account for 8% of the overall population and 33% of the African-American male population. That's from the University of Georgia. Between 1980 and 2010, the adult male population that had spent time in prison jumped from 1.79 to 5.55%. For African-American men, that figure rose from 5.76 to 15%. The growth, scope, and spatial distribution of people with felony records in the United States, that's where this came from, was from 1948 to 2010. That was published about 15 years ago or so. Between 1980 and 2010, the adult male population that had received a felony conviction rose from 5.25% to 12.8%. For African-American men, the number soared from 13.29 to, again, 33%. That's from the growth, scope, and spatial distribution of people with felony records in the United States from 1948 to 2010. That was published on September of 2017. So what am I trying to say here? Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, the group that they are focused on, if you're a felon, and for the most part, you can't vote. So the group that they're focusing on are not voters, so they're not having an impact like they're hoping for. But the other part of that is this time frame when Democrats are focusing on, like I said, the black vote, the Hispanic vote. Clearly, their policies aren't benefiting those communities. If 1/3 of the adult men in your community are felons, and that is increased, significantly over the last 2, 3, 4 decades when Democrats were really focusing on identity politics, they're basically saying, wait a minute, this is not benefiting us at all. In fact, our community is getting worse. And if you look at some of the policies that led to that, they're coming from the Democratic Party. Every 2 years, the Democrats come out and say, hey, we're going to save you. We're going to help you. We're the only ones that care about you. But here we are 3, 4, 5 decades later, and most of their adult males are in jail and can't vote.
Yeah, what's interesting is back in 2020, I remember all over social media, there were these campaigns about how in California we have taken away people's right to vote, and almost comparing having served jail time with being a prisoner. And there was just all of this messaging about that we should let felons vote. And I think it had been on the ballot before 2020, but in 2020, they did a really good job campaigning for this proposition. I forget what prop it was. I think it was in the teens, like 17 or something. Mm-hmm. But this proposition was basically saying if you're a felon, you should be allowed to vote as long as you're not actively in prison. So it expanded it so that felons who had finished serving their time but were still on parole or probation or mandatory supervision, all of those folks could vote. And that passed in 2020 in California. So California got, a fair number of votes from that, I'm sure. But I thought that was so interesting that they were comparing it to, we're not letting these people who served their time and, have been good members of society since their felony conviction, like we're not letting them have a voice. But in reality, that's not what the proposition was. That's what the advertising was. The proposition itself was saying, regardless of whether or not you finish serving your time, even if you're still on probation, even if you're still on parole, even if you're still on mandatory supervision, you should be allowed to vote. And it's like, well, if we look at recidivism rates for those folks, it's like a lot of them go back to jail. So we're giving them an opportunity to vote basically just to benefit the Democratic Party.
Well, and I think they had to do something. You know what I mean? They
Right.
had to do something.
It was a panic. It was 100%.
And if you look at the last two presidential candidates that were Democrats, Kamala Harris was a district attorney.
Yeah.
Part of her job was putting people in jail, and she was doing it for
questionable reasons.
Nonviolent crimes and that sort of thing. And then before or I'm sorry, before her was Biden,
Yeah.
who back in the '90s was the champion of the crime bill that is now it's a rally cry from the black community. We're basically saying, hey, you guys are using this disproportionately against us. And so those were the last two presidential candidates from the Democratic Party. So if you look at the way people are moving, the way the adjustments that are being, and by the way, this is the first time in U.S. history that states are losing, that a state is losing an electoral vote / member of Congress because they shrunk, not because another state grew.
Interesting.
So California and New York are actually shrinking. So people are leaving because of the policies, but then they're also they're losing some of their base support. So the electoral college is going to look very different in 2030. Very different.
It's just an interesting reminder that politicians do not care about you. They do not care about your family. They do not care about this country. They care about your vote.
That's true. And one of the things I would talk about all the time is the fact that you have two tools. You have two tools, and that's people and money. When it comes to politics, it doesn't matter how good your ideas are. It doesn't matter who your friends are and who your buddy is or whatever. It matters that you have more people and more money than the other side. Because if you have great ideas, and you have no people and no money behind it, then you're just sitting on the couch yelling at the news. But if you have horrible ideas and you have a ton of people and a ton of money behind it, then you turn into California. People and money, that's. Hey, thanks for watching Gun Owners Radio. I hope you loved that clip. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and follow us on social media. And check out our website at gunownersradio.com.